What's a scary, unsettling fact about you? Story 1. This is a weird one, but I promise you, no bullshit. I had a metal screw or bolt roughly 1.5 inches long stuck in my right lung from age 2 to 17. I must have put it in my mouth as a toddler and it got in there somehow. Anyway, the unsettling bit is that I always knew there was something seriously wrong with my body because my whole life I would have instances in which I coughed uncontrollably, many times coughing up blood, sometimes a little, sometimes a lot. But I never told anyone. Dad was neglectful and my mom was always working, so it was relatively easy to hide. If it happened at school, I'd excuse myself to the restroom until it stopped. No one ever showed concern for those 15 years, so I guess I kept it to myself well enough. I never told anyone because even as a small child, I was very unhappy with life and wanted it to be over. I guess I figured my mystery illness would get me eventually, so I kept it a secret so I wouldn't get treated. It all came to a head at 17 when playing ball at the park with my parents, siblings, and some friends. I got a decent hit and ran around the bases when I started coughing. After sitting back down, I tried to hold it in, but I couldn't, and this time it was too bloody to hide and no bathroom to go to. So my step-uncle noticed after a minute or two, everyone was crowded around me while I'm coughing up a shitload of blood in and around a trash can. My little brother told me after that they actually sent guys in hazmat suits to clean it up because they didn't know if whatever was wrong with me was contagious. But anyway, I got to the hospital and got the x-ray which showed the screw lit up like Christmas imposed over my ribcage. Dr. Guy just went, "Well, there's your problem." I guess he was trying to lighten the mood since everyone is understandably freaking the fuck out. 2 weeks of surgery, 3 total, and it was out. I still have breathing issues, but the cough is gone now. I made the screw into a necklace, which I wear sometimes because I find it oddly comforting to be reminded of my own mortality. I know that's weird, but it's just sort of how I am, I guess, considering all things. I never told my family I knew there was something wrong with me because telling them would mean admitting to them that I wanted to die the whole time. I still struggle with mental health crap for this and many other reasons I won't get into, but things are a lot easier than they used to be. Story 2. Growing up, I had a recurring nightmare set in my grandparents' backyard looking at the back of their house. There was just something off about the house, something mildly sinister. I dreamt this over and over many times over the years. In 2018, my dad, who now owned the house, went into the backyard to that spot and killed himself. I haven't had the backyard dream since. Story 3. Not really scary or unsettling, but I do end up having to explain without trying to get into details to people why I refuse to drink from any kind of retail item that is not translucent. For example, soda or beer cans, milk or OJ cartons, etc. People's curiosity compels them to ask me why when I tell them to let it be, and assuredly enough, they never like the answer. I had a dead mouse parts slide down my throat chugging a beer on a golf course. Story 4. I inherited a lot of money from my grandmother about 2 years ago that no one in my family knew existed. I still don't know where it came from. Her lawyer wouldn't tell me, but it's in the upper 7 figures. My father, her son, got the flat she owned and we all thought that was everything she had. Apparently it wasn't, but I haven't had told anyone about it and I don't plan on doing so either. I just work a normal 8 to 5 desk job, rent a flat downtown in the city I live in, nothing expensive. And I live a normal life on my own. No partner or children, no expensive vacations, and I don't even have a car. I just don't feel comfortable sharing the secret, and the longer I keep it, the stranger it would get telling it. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. Don't ever tell them. It'll ruin any relationship you have with your relatives. Story 5. My grandfather was murdered on the res by a skinhead dude who serial murdered native people and dropped them in the wilderness. It took them years to catch him. I was at his execution in another state. He deserved worse than falling asleep peacefully. I was a child mule in Detroit for 3 years. I made more money in 3 years than most people will ever see in a decade. I did some pretty scary stuff that I won't get into here that was under coercion. I'm not proud of it. It's scary what I've seen dudes do over money. I bought my mom a house because her husband was on Oxy and gambled her life savings. Made sure my brother and sisters ate, cashed in my mom's glove box every week with a spare key. No questions, no answers. I dipped when stuff got real pressured and scary for me to be quote-unquote promoted. I killed a man outside a bar in the defense of another person. The whole bar saw him drag his girlfriend out by the arm and no one called the police or followed. I was just there for dinner, not drinking. I had a legal piece in the car. I holstered up and went looking. Heard screaming from behind the gated dumpster. She was begging. His pants were down. I yelled at him to freeze. I yelled at him to lay down. He pulled his pants up and had a knife in his hand. The girl was bleeding. He charged me and I emptied a mag into him as soon as he wasn't in front of her. Broke my pistol down, put it on the pavement, and called for the cops and an ambulance. Got arrested, but she testified and he was on camera charging me with a big boot knife. I didn't get charged because she was stabbed, bleeding, being assaulted, and he charged me with a deadly weapon. I still think about it sometimes. I don't regret it, and that was about 10 years ago. My wife and I got married 9 years ago, and I never told her. As far as she knows, I have a close female friend that lives in Alabama. It's not something that comes up in casual conversation either. By the way, new girlfriend, I killed a dude. Nah, it doesn't work that way. I don't think it was necessary to talk about it. I went to therapy and stayed quiet. That girl emails me every once in a while. She's healed, married, and happy. I visited her in the hospital for a while till her parents got here from Alabama. I went to her wedding a couple years ago. It was beautiful. Nice dude, too. I don't bother her. Her parents tried to give me some money, but I felt really greasy about taking it, so I didn't. Kinda wish I had lately, though, but still glad I didn't. No one knows I'm on Reddit, or I genuinely wouldn't say any of this here. I said it in some random group chats during therapy to get it out and haven't really mentioned it until now, honestly. Story 6. I'm slowly leaving society, and I don't plan to tell anyone. I purchased a small piece of property, one small cabin in which I'll live, and a second that has been remodeled for use as a rental to subsidize my income. I have 2+ years of work left and have no intention of telling them either. My parents are both dead, and my brother has been estranged for 2 decades. When I hit my monetary goal in a couple of years, I'm just not showing up for life anymore. I've deleted all socials aside from Reddit, as I use it for news and information to stay current until I leave the grid. My phone will also be left behind. I plan to take a laptop to communicate with a rental agency and any issues with renters that may arise, as I plan to act as the caretaker of said rental. I'm just walking away from it all. Work, friends, any and all obligations. The world just tires me, and I see no point in continuing to be part of it in any real scale, and telling no one. Story 7. When I was 11, I witnessed my stepdad attack my mom. I was in my room and heard my mom yell and scream, so I left my room to see what happened. When I stepped into the hallway, I could see partly into the kitchen, and she was standing there with her back up against the corner of the countertop with a terrible look on her face and a swelling cheek. My stepdad was about 5 feet away with 3 long bleeding scratches down his cheek from where she retaliated. I guess I just didn't know how to react, so I just turned around and went back to my room. That weekend, I spent Friday night at my best friend's house. I knew his older brother had a .38 Chief Special revolver in a hidden drawer he had built under his waterbed frame. Before I left, I stuffed the gun into my rolled-up sleeping bag. I chickened out that first night. That was a Saturday, but Sunday night, around 2 or 3 a.m., I think, I took the revolver into their room and woke him up by jamming it under his chin. He woke up immediately and kind of reactively pulled his head back away from the barrel. I pushed it hard into his throat and said something like, "Don't ever hurt my mom again, or I'll kill you." I don't remember exactly what I said, but I do remember feeling like the world was spinning 1,000 miles per hour around me and that I was weightless. I don't remember anything after saying that to him until I was back in my room. I dropped the gun on the floor and burst into the hardest sobbing I have ever experienced. It seemed like it lasted for hours. I don't know how long I actually cried, but when I finally stopped, I was drenched in sweat and tears down my entire front side. I put the gun in my backpack and snuck it back into that drawer under the waterbed 2 or 3 days later. The next time, I was at my friend's house. Not a word was ever said about what I did by myself or my stepdad, but as far as I know, he never touched my mom again. They divorced 3 or 4 years later. I ran into my friend's brother at a bar about 10 years later, and I told him about borrowing his gun, thinking he would just laugh it off as me telling drunk bar lies. He didn't. He believed me completely and even stated that sometimes when I was at their house, I would make little comments that his family understood to mean that my home life wasn't great. He's a big biker type of guy, and he just grabbed me, pulled me off the bar stool, and hugged me for like 5 straight minutes. He was a great dude. This all sounds overdramatic after reading it back to myself, but it's written exactly as I remember it. Thanks for the chance to share this. Until now, my friend's brother and my stepdad were the only others who knew about it. Story 8. I don't know if scary, unsettling will quite fit here, but if I met you 3 years ago and then haven't seen you since then, I will remember your name and several random things you told me. I've had to learn to play dumb and act like I don't remember certain things because it just kind of creeps people the hell out and gives off a stalker vibe, though it is useful when I want to screw with someone. Story 9. Was co-convicted of manslaughter with diminished responsibilities when I was 16 years old. It was quite high profile at the time in all the main newspapers, so I'll change a few details but give you the basics. So a mutual friend of mine and my co-conspirator attacked my friend's young sister. We learned about it later in the day after it happened. We went to his home, argued with him, and then struck him once with the flat edge of a hammer. He died 3 to 4 days later after being put in a drug-induced coma. We were both arrested for murder and kept on bail for a year whilst the CPS made their case. As we were both of decent homes with no previous experience, our lawyer argued anyone would do the same given the situation, so murder became manslaughter, eventually. I was sentenced to 3 years and did 18 months, and my friend got 5 years and served 3. Although I never hit him, they argued I went along willingly, knowing that violence was probably going to happen. That's why I got time, even though I technically didn't touch him. Story 10. My father hit me, sometimes with a closed fist. He even pointed a gun at my sister and me and threatened to pull the trigger if my mom left him. He's also a drug addict. That's not the scary thing about me, though. The scary thing about me is that my father is in me and can come out. People think I'm a really nice person and I really try to be a good person, but when I get angry, like really angry, he can come out. This is why I don't drink or do drugs. I just have to make sure to stay on top of it. I have the belt that my father liked to hit us with. He wanted me to have it for some reason. I keep it hanging so that I have to always see it and remind myself to keep myself in check. Story 11. When I was 18 years old, I was incarcerated for 3 years, found not guilty, and acquitted on all charges. I had roughly 12 charges, some of which would have led to life in prison, and had I been found guilty, I knew I was innocent and decided to fight my case. My best friend at the time was found guilty and given 3 life sentences. At one point, about a year and a half in, the DA offered me 7 years and 2 felony strikes as a deal, or I could roll on my best friend and go home that same day. I passed and had to continue to fight my case as I knew they didn't have any solid evidence against me. As my parents ran out of money for an attorney, I was eventually appointed a state attorney who fought for me tooth and nail. He kicked out and listened to everything I presented to him about why I wasn't guilty. Mind you, I was 18 and I was surrounded by grown men and saw some horrific shit. I kept in contact with my attorney afterward and informed him that I was still doing well out here. He died a couple of years ago. Now, don't get me wrong, I was no saint. I was in a gang and running the streets and up to no good, but I wasn't guilty of these charges. A part of me felt that maybe it was the universe's way of slowing me down and helping me get my shit together. Took a short while, but I've been on the right track. This February will be 20 years since I've been released. Story 12. I used to be a prison officer. One morning, my partner went to wake up a prisoner early in the morning so they had time to make their court appearance later in the day. Meanwhile, I stayed in the control room overlooking the wing. She opened his cell door and discovered he was hanging by his shoelace. We called it in and she cut him down and started CPR despite seeing the blood in his eyes and his throat all swollen up. He was dead. Training and procedures state it doesn't matter, we have to do what we can. I ran at full speed to assist and she was losing it. He is dead, what do we do? I told her to stop so she can have a minute and I took over. I started chest compressions and felt the ribs snap and break. I gave him mouth-to-mouth and continued CPR. After 6 minutes or so, other officers arrived on the scene and took over. CPR over a few minutes felt like half an hour. Everyone was talking about how we can have the rest of the week to recover and asking if we're okay. I felt fine. I told people this and the response was, "It hasn't hit you yet." A few hours went by and the officer I was with was in tears. I still felt okay. The next few days go by and the officer I was with took a few days off. I was still fine. She tells me how she wakes up in the middle of the night and while half asleep sees her dressing gown hung up and in her half-sleepy state thinks it's a hanging body. She sits up screaming. I'm still fine. Weeks go by and I still have no feelings toward the matter. Now it's been 3 years and I still couldn't give the slightest crap about the whole matter. Turns out death really doesn't faze me in the slightest. The only thing that stuck with me is the feeling and sound of his bones cracking and snapping. I felt the vibrations up my arms for days afterwards. Death doesn't bother me, but bones cracking as I try to bring him back do? Pretty sure that isn't normal. Story 13. People will just come up to me, unprompted, and tell me about the dark aspects of their life, how their last date groped them, how their parent is dying and they're tired of putting on a brave face, how they got into a loveless marriage because it was economically convenient at the time and now with 2 kids in, they can't possibly leave. That they really want to have an affair because they never dated before their current marriage. That they're homeless and literally sleeping in their car outside work at night, but shh, don't tell anyone. It can be at work, at a coffee shop, at the mechanic, etc. I just do the usual, hey, how's it going? Or what's going on? Or you good? Story 14. When I was about 10 years old, I threw a wooden ball at my brother's head while we were fighting. He was walking by our stairs at the time and fell down, hit his head on the tile, and was knocked unconscious. There was a blood splatter under his head. I backed up into the other room and returned to watching TV, pretending like I hadn't seen anything. My mom heard the thud and found him. I only went to see what was up after I knew I wouldn't be the first down those stairs. He was totally fine. The splatter looked like way more blood than it was, and he had barely a scratch on him. He doesn't remember how he fell, and I really thought I had killed him, and my first thought was how I could get out of any of the consequences. Not sure what that says about my character. Story 15. I probably dislodged the blood clot in my mom's leg that went to her lungs and killed her. It was part of an effort by both my dad and I to improve her quality of life. She had myotonic dystrophy and was bedbound, not enough muscle mass to carry her own weight, which wasn't terribly high, just muscles waste away. Didn't want showers, hair wash, or see doctors, and for far too long, we let her do whatever she wanted. We started cleaning her up and getting her to do some exercises and eat better. I gave her a sponge bath weekly as part of negotiations with her, and one day she just started looking bad. Malaise, change in pallor, drooling, not able to speak clearly. She wasn't ready to see a doctor yet, then just suddenly died. Autopsy indicated pulmonary embolism. Story 16. My mother tried to murder me like 18 times. Various methods: strangling, smothering, aggravating my allergies with dust and cat dander, etc. Trying to throw me into the gorge at Niagara, push me out of a window, push me out of a car on I-95 doing about 70, push me over a seawall onto some rocks during a gale, locking me in a closed garage with a car running, twice, swinging an axe at me, twice, and those are the highlights. Story 17. I'm convinced with no evidence that my father is still alive and that my whole family is lying to me. I logically know he is not, but every knock on the door I open half expecting my father. Could be something to work through though, but it's not really affecting me day to day. My grandfather died and I thought I would feel the same way. Nope, he is dead and I miss him, but he is dead. Story 18. My dog and my mother died in the same year. I was so devastated when my dog passed that kind of pain doesn't even touch the pain of losing my mom. Partially because she had given up on me in life years before she died. She drank herself to death and got sepsis. My dad killed himself in 2002. I'm 38 now. I miss them. I miss my dog more though. She was always there for me through so much illness and loneliness and pain. She was my best friend. R.I.P. Story 19. Not sure if it's scary, but my dad OD'd on heroin and died. I probably could have saved him too. I went downstairs at like 1 a.m. to get a drink and saw the bathroom door closed with the light on. I thought about pounding on the door to scare him, which is something I would do to mess with him. I walked up to the door, went to knock on it, but thought to myself, nah, don't mess with him, and I walked away. I woke up later finding out he was dead from an OD. Story 20. What is a scary, unsettling fact about me? I can without touching myself.